The sky burned orange over the endless wheat fields, the sun melting into the horizon like gold poured across the earth. The giant farmer stood at the edge of the furrows, his shadow stretching for yards, swallowing the smaller shapes of fences, tools, and the trembling figure of the pastor's daughter beside him. The wind tugged at her hair, whipping strands against her dirt-streaked face. Her knees were raw, her palms bruised. She had fallen again, and again. The giant's voice rolled across the field, deep and steady. Again, he said, his tone leaving no space for argument. She shook her head, breath shuddering. I can't, she whispered. The word cracked in her throat like dry stalks underfoot. It hurts too much. He crouched down, the ground groaning beneath his weight. Even kneeling, he towered over her. Pain isn't your enemy, he said, his gaze soft but unyielding. It's the map that shows you where your strength begins. The girl looked at the dirt beneath her hands, the same dirt that had raised crops, fed families, and now demanded her effort too. Her father had told her to seek help here, at the farm beyond the river, where the giant worked the land that others feared to touch. She hadn't known what to expect. She hadn't expected this. You'll endure every inch, the giant said, his hand hovering just above her shoulder, until you can walk. His voice no longer thundered, it was a quiet promise, weighted with the same gravity that held the mountains in place. The girl drew in a trembling breath. The smell of the earth filled her lungs, rich, damp, alive. Slowly, she placed one hand on her knee, then the other. Her muscles quivered as she pushed upward. The pain flared, sharp and clean, but she didn't fall. The giant's shadow moved beside her, steady and patient. Good, he said. Now again. Each step was a battle. The soil clung to her bare feet, cool and heavy, as if testing her will. Sweat ran down her temples, tears mixed with dust on her cheeks. The horizon blurred. Still, she moved forward. Inch by inch. The giant followed in silence, his enormous hand ready but never interfering. When she faltered, he simply watched, calm, immovable, like the earth itself waiting to see if the seed would grow. When she finally reached the end of the row, her breath was ragged, her body trembling with exhaustion. But she was standing. She was walking. The giant farmer's lips curved into the faintest smile. Now, he said quietly, you know what the ground asks of those who wish to rise from it. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wheat and rain. The girl lifted her face to the horizon, the orange light warming her skin. For the first time, she did not feel small beside him. She felt strong enough to keep going. Rain hammered the roof of the old barn, a relentless percussion that drowned out the crickets and turned the world outside into a blur of gray. The air inside smelled of hay and smoke, damp wood and iron. Lantern light flickered across the rafters, throwing long shadows that swayed like restless ghosts. On a wooden bench near the wall, the pastor's daughter lay trembling, her leg bound with rough strips of linen. The cloth was stained dark from the blood that had soaked through hours ago. She clenched her jaw as another wave of pain surged through her body. The storm outside seemed to echo her breath, uneven, gasping, alive with struggle. The giant farmer crouched beside her, his massive hands steady despite the storm. The barn seemed almost too small for him, he had to keep his shoulders hunched to avoid the low beams. Each movement he made carried the weight of years, of harvests, of labor, of loss. His face, lined and weathered, was calm, but his eyes burned with something fierce and protective. You think strength is born easy? He said, his voice low, deep as thunder rolling over the fields. He dipped a rag into a basin of water and wrung it out. The water hissed when it hit the oil lamp's flame. It grows through pain, like corn through stone. The girl didn't answer. Her lips were pale, her hands gripping the edges of the bench until her knuckles whitened. He pressed the damp cloth against her wound, and she gasped, sharp and raw. Tears sprang to her eyes. Every inch you suffer, he continued, not unkindly, brings you closer to standing again. You'll endure every inch until you can walk. Her breath came in broken bursts. Why do you care if I walk? He looked at her then, his shadow falling across her like a shroud. Because the ground remembers who falls upon it, he said. And it remembers who stands again. For a moment, only the rain spoke. The sound filled the barn like a heartbeat, steady and ancient. He finished wrapping the bandage, tying it off with a knot so gentle it seemed impossible for hands that large. Then he reached for a cup beside the bench, filled it with water, and held it out to her. Drink, he said. Her fingers trembled as she took it, but she drank. The water was cold and clean, and when she handed the cup back, something had shifted in her eyes. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a spark of something else. Outside, lightning cracked across the fields, painting the world in white for an instant. The giant stood, his head brushing the rafters. The storm will pass, he said, glancing toward the door. They always do. What matters is what you are when the sun returns. She watched him move toward the entrance, his steps shaking the floorboards. For a moment, she imagined him not as a man, but as part of the land itself, rooted, immovable, born of soil and sky. When he paused and turned back, she met his gaze. I'll walk, she said, her voice soft but certain. He nodded once, and for the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been pride, or relief. The lantern flame swayed, throwing their shadows together against the barn wall, one vast, one small, both unbroken, as the rain began to ease, and the first distant hint of dawn touched the sky beyond the fields.